What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Lighting a Lamp Podcast. I am here with Steve.
Hello.
And Tim.
Your co-host with the most.
And this is our 3/4 / kind of end of the year, looking at the end of the season here episode. I mean, most teams by now are pushing that 45 to 40. Some teams are up to 48 games played already. It's the end of the season. Teams have 10 or fewer games played for the most, 10 or fewer games left for the most part. So really, this is it. This is like knuckle down, make or break on the playoffs situation. So we're just gonna talk about it. We're not gonna do the whole awards thing like we did for the quarter and half, just because this is, end of the year. There's not much more time left, so we'll do a whole awards wrap up. Our projections for the awards at the end of the season. So. I guess we can kind of talk. I think one of the more interesting divisions right now, for me at least, is the Central Division, because the top three spots, right now, technically speaking, we're recording this at 6:40, April 22nd. Only one team to this point has clinched, which is the Vegas Golden Knights, and only two teams have been eliminated, which is the Devils and the Sabres. Now, if the Avalanche win tonight, they clinch. So for all intents and purposes, the Colorado Avalanche have clinched a playoff spot. I mean, if they would have to lose every single game for the rest of the season, and the Blues and Yotes would have to win every single game for the rest of the season,
Literally not gonna happen.
Yeah. So the Knights and the Avs
did it once. Let them strike again.
They've clinched, right? So I think the Central Division, the top three teams, the Hurricanes, Panthers, and Lightning, is pretty interesting, or not interesting, really. I would say, just because they've more or less locked themselves up a playoff spot. But that fourth spot is a dogfight between the Predators, the Stars, and the Blackhawks. Technically, by points percentage right now, the Stars are the fourth best team, just barely, over the Nashville Predators. Who's taking this last spot between the Preds, the Stars, and the Blackhawks? Who do you guys think?
The Dallas Stars ran into a few injuries the other night that could be pretty detrimental to the rest of their season.
Is a game-time decision. Rupe Haynes is a game-time decision. So we'll see if they play tonight, but I mean, they didn't play on. Well, I mean, I can't really judge how the team looks because they played the Red Wings. So
Yeah,
and it's a shame that they're losing their players during the stretch of the team that they need to beat.
especially if they're looking to make up any ground. Yeah, I mean, I don't really think this division's all that much of a surprise, just based on where everyone's sitting. Like, the biggest surprise at one point for this division for me was when the Blackhawks were in the playoff position. But it's kind of shaken out to pretty much where I thought it would be. I just really thought Dallas was going to be, a head and shoulders above Nashville here, because, they did play for a Stanley Cup last year. But I don't know. I mean, Nashville's still got a really solid back end, and their goaltending's been better this year than it was last year. So I'm curious to see who gets hot enough to take this, because there's a 3-point spread and there's not a lot of wiggle room for these teams.
I think Dallas's issue is when you look at that third column there, 12 losses past regulation. I mean, that's 12 points that they left on the table. Even if they win half of those, they're sitting at 56 points with 3 games in hand over the Predators. Right now, they're sitting 2 points back with 3 games in hand.
I just think it's funny that the Dallas Stars are the only. Them and the Blackhawks both have a losing record, technically, when you combine their overtime. I mean, the Stars are really only here by virtue of getting to overtime 12 times, because otherwise they'd probably be in the bottom and the basement of the division. They've only won 19 games compared to everybody else's 25 plus.
I mean, if that tells you anything, that's only 3 more games than both the Red Wings and Jackets, who, by the way, the Red Wings and Jackets tied for last in the division. The Jackets can't even manage to stay out of the basement at this point.
The Jackets are throwing the season.
Well, they're looking to see if okay, so real quick, if the Jackets get a lottery pick and Jarmo Kekalainen goes up there and throws a curveball from picking some other kid that no one's ever heard of, he might. I would fire him on the spot, honestly.
Oh, you mean Dmytro Chinnikov wasn't your top 15 pick last year?
The kid wasn't even ranked in the top 700, I don't think. I'm pretty sure Rob McKenzie didn't even know who he was.
What was his name? It wasn't Chinnikov. Was it Chinnikov?
It was something like that, because Igor Sharangovich went short. Oh, no, not Igor Sharangovich. That kid the Devils drafted, Muhammad, that really crazy name.
Mook Madalin or something like that.
because he was also like a reach, but he was like supposed to be a second round pick at least. So you could see why they reached for him at the back end of the first round.
Devils, they got Holtz, who, I mean, it's Holtz. He's going to be good.
Yeah.
Shakir Mukhamadullin from Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the one that they were all like, who the hell is this guy? Like, Mukhamadullin. Like,
The name's kind of wild, though.
It sounds like a made up name though.
It really does. And I'm trying to make fun of this kid's real name, but like, bro,
Chinikov went.
It sounds
to,
like a name that they made
Jackets.
up on the spot in a Seinfeld episode.
yeah, it's almost like, you know when you play GM mode and you get like 6-7 years in the future and you start getting kids named like Yegor Ugam Strombopoulos and you're like, all right. You're like, yeah, well, the games are just throwing letters at it at this point. Like, that's kind of what that name felt like. But I mean, listen, he's a first round pick, so he's better at hockey than I'll ever be in my life. But
well, okay, so Mukhamadullin was the Devils draft pick. Yegor Chinikov was the Jackets pick.
yeah,
right?
the kid they went off the board with.
So, I mean, I guess a good question outside of the playoff race is, I guess talk about the end of the season implications. Like, this has to be the end of the road for Tortorella, right? Like,
Well, it's either him or Laine, and I'd bet on Laine more than I would on Tortorella right now.
So, I mean, Tortorella's got to be gone. I mean, there's no way you go from knocking off the Toronto Maple Leafs in the qualifiers to literally tied with the Detroit Red Wings.
Yeah.
In a division I mean, let's be honest here. I think this is arguably the weakest division. I mean, either that or the North Division for sure.
Really?
In terms of a Tortorella track record, we're right on pace for
actually,
when
the
he should
West
be
kind of
leaving.
sucks, dude.
Yeah, okay, the Pacific Division's kind of ass. Like, the St. Louis Blues are not good this year.
I'll say it's top heavy.
Yeah.
So the top three teams are great. Don't get me wrong. I think the top three teams in my mind are either legitimate and or borderline Stanley Cup contenders.
I think we'd say that about most of these divisions, though. I think a lot of these divisions, the way they arrange them, are like very top heavy. Like,
except for the East, really. Yeah.
Well, the East is a dogfight between like the top 6 teams. It's a dogfight now. Even though the Flyers have been absolute garbage in the last 6 weeks, they're realistically still in a playoff hunt. They're only 9 points back or 11 points back, which I mean is almost insurmountable this late in the season. Like, Boston would have to drop every single game.
They're just about out, but not quite. But the Rangers are 6 points out.
They have 2 games. They lost the 2 games in hand to Boston.
Right.
So,
but their schedule is relatively easy for the rest of the year.
except for the 2 games against Boston at the end of the season.
They don't play another team in the playoffs until.
But they might catch a
the last week
lacking
of the
Boston
season.
team going for a playoff break.
Maybe, yeah. I mean,
I think it depends, right? The issue is, like, realistically speaking, unless the Penguins, like, or the Islanders just, or even the Capitals, I guess, unless one of these teams decides to just stop playing hockey, the issue for the Rangers is going to come down to they won't necessarily catch a team who's already in a playoff spot just coasting, because they don't play another team in a playoff spot until the last week of the season when they play the Bruins and Capitals twice each. The rest of the way, except for the Islanders, they play the Islanders, I think, twice more?
2 more times, yeah.
And then it's Devils and Flyers and Sabres, I believe. So they have an easy schedule, but it's not looking great, but they're not out of it yet for sure. Just because their schedule is, and plus, like Tim said, if they get close enough, those last 2 games against Boston could be huge.
I mean, it could end the season. It could be like in 2010 when the Rangers played the Flyers on the last day of the season to make the playoffs and they lost. But I guess the real question with the Blue Jackets is, like, what direction do you move in now, right? Because, like,
I think they're on par for course with Tortorella's coaching time.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean,
the team had their best season last season. He is driving out all the best players this season. Or not the best players. He's driving out a bunch of players this season, making everyone hate him. And now he's gonna leave. They're gonna bring in someone else, and they'll do a Ranger cycle. Ranger South.
My question is,
forever.
So what I was trying to say is, like, what direction do you think they go with the build? Like, who are you drafting with this lottery pick? Really, like, what direction are you looking?
Or do you draft with it? Is the question.
Well, because the real thing is, like, it's this top 10 is so defense heavy. It looks like, right, with guys like Luke Hughes and Owen Power, and
like, they don't need defense.
That's exactly
Does
it.
Laine have a no movement clause or anything in his?
He's on RFA, so his
I'm saying-
contract's up at the end of the season.
I'm saying, so I mean, they could try and maybe
Well, as soon as the season ends,
Yeah.
if he had a no move clause, the minute the season ends, his contract is up. So.
Yeah.
Or I think it's July 1st. Your contract technically rolls
July
over.
1st,
But he's an RFA, so even if he had a no move clause, they could just wait until July 1st and then trade him wherever they wanted to.
I'm saying they could maybe try and sign him to just a short term and then trade him, like a sign and trade, and then maybe you move that draft pick if he really wants out of there. I have no idea, but if he's not looking to stay in Columbus because they're keeping Torts, then that wouldn't be the worst idea ever. Line A and a first is a pretty good trade.
I think Torts, in my opinion, Torts is going to be the coach of the Kraken. I think if I had to bet money on it, but I mean the issue is Jones and Werenski are 26.
Mm-hmm.
You have two, not generational maybe, but two top 10 for sure, arguably top 5, arguably the best defensive pair in the league. I mean they're definitely top 3 defensive pairing.
Yeah.
I mean I'd put them up there with Slave and Hamilton and take a pick of a third team, but they're definitely up there. So I don't think that committing to a full rebuild with a 26-year-old player this good is really an option. You could try to hit a retool, but then again, they also have, they have good goaltending. I like Korpisalo. I like Elvis Merzlikins. I don't think this year is on them. I think that they have an opportunity here. And the opportunity is to build this roster in a new direction. Because you got rid of Nick Foligno, unwillingly, but you got rid of Nick Foligno. You traded away PLD. You got Patrick Laine. You have a cornerstone scoring piece. I think there's an opportunity to build a more scoring-friendly roster, which I think, honestly, if you're getting rid of Tortorella, I think that's the direction you have to go.
Yeah.
Because this roster was built basically for John Tortorella.
Imagine they brought in AV. If they brought in AV, because Philly should realistically maybe
fire him.
Consider getting rid of him. So how crazy would it be if this Columbus Blue Jackets the Colombo Blue Jackets followed the cycle of the Rangers?
It'd be interesting. I just don't see the Flyers pulling the trigger on AV this soon. He's only been there 2 years now. I think they give him another year. If they start slow next year, he's gone. But
I think he's on the hot seat for sure. I don't know if they fire him just because, like you said, he hasn't been there for too long. But then again, they are also a team that should be in a win-now mode. Realistically, they should have been competing for a Stanley Cup this year. That's just the mode that this roster is in. It's the way that this roster is built.
We all thought they were going to be competing for the top spot in the division. So,
and yeah, exactly. And I think Tortorella and AV, if you can point to any two teams and say that the issue is so obviously the coaching, it's those two. Other teams that are out of it, like the Rangers, I think you can make a strong argument it's the coaching, but you could also point to them and say, oh, well, they're still young, they're still learning how to play defense, right? The Canucks, you can point to them and say, look, they took a step back on purpose this year. But when you look at the Flyers and the Jackets, it's so obvious that the coaching is the issue here. Because you don't go from Game 7 of the second round against the Islanders last year, coming back from 3-1 down, lose basically no major pieces, and then get this bad.
Yeah, and have your entire system break down almost entirely.
And you got better, by the way, because Nolan Patrick is healthy. So you lose
Carter
Matt
Hart's another
Niskanen.
year older.
Just on top of that, Rangers, I think the Rangers offense has coaching problems. The Rangers defense has a clear, there's clear errors on defense when you're watching the game.
Well, there's roster issues on defense for sure.
Yeah. Well,
I think
so just an anecdote about that.
But I mean, they're an interesting team too. What do you think? Because let's say, for argument's sake, they don't make the playoffs this year, right? Obviously, you're not rebuilding anymore. You're also not in a win now mode, though. What is this? Was supposed to be a year they were supposed to take a step forward and make the playoffs. If they don't, I mean, obviously, I think the answer is you make minor moves. But what are you looking to build with the New York Rangers here? Are you making a move on defense? Maybe do you maybe try to a move that's been talked about for the last couple of years? Maybe make a bigger splash, trade away either one of your top two centers for a bona fide, no question, no doubt about it, top two center.
I mean, center depth is an issue, but I really think as of late, it's sorted itself out. Zibanejad's been better recently. Strome's almost is a point per game player again this year. He's on pace to match his career high like he did for the Rangers. So I think like all the question marks in the center position really are getting answered. I don't know if they're long-term solutions, but I mean like Ryan Strome with another year on his contract isn't the worst like option to hold on to when you're waiting for Philip Tehedel to take the next step. I really just think they need to make a move on defense, do something. I mean, they need to make it a little harder to play in their end. They really only have like two real physical defensemen in Ryan Lindgren and Jacob Trouba. And we never lose Ryan Lindgren to injury because the guy's got a face made of iron. But like, Trouba's been out of the lineup twice this year already, and now it looks like every time he does, you can tell there's a noticeable drop off in physicality and defensive zone coverage from the team.
That was a very bizarre injury against the Islanders because I mean it was a hard hit, but it was kind of a routine hard hit. You know, it's the kind of hit that Trouba takes every game.
Yeah, I didn't actually see it.
It was very weird. So Trouba basically flattened Matt Martin along the boards. Clean hit, good play. And then the Islanders dump it in the corner. And Matt Martin goes in on a forecheck to retrieve the puck. So he hits Trouba. It was shoulder to shoulder. Trouba's head whiplashed a little bit, but Trouba saw him coming. It's not like he was hit from behind. Martin glided into the hit, and it was just very weird because it was a hit that Trouba takes and a hit that Trouba makes every game. But Matt Martin hit him, and Trouba tried to stumble to his skates, and he looked like a newborn baby deer. Like he could not stay on his skates. It was kind of scary, to be honest with you. So I think that leads me to believe there's some kind of head trauma
Well, it's a
there.
concussion. They're pretty much they're not saying it, but it's everybody's kind of understands.
It was just such a weird play because it wasn't like a vicious hit. It wasn't even one of the harder hits Martin's ever thrown. But I don't know. It was a very strange play. But I mean, I think it's interesting. I think the Rangers are in a good spot from a franchise standpoint. I mean, is this a disappointing year? I think so. I think one of the things that they need to do, because this has happened this happened last season and it's happened this season. It's almost like they wait until they're just about out of it, and then they just like go white hot at the end of the season for some reason. And I think that comes with youth. I mean, I think that's a sign of the youth being like inconsistent through the regular season, right? And then towards the end of it, they're like, oh snap, like we're 10 points out with 20 games left. We need to start turning it on. Yeah, like
I also think that's a coaching and a management thing. When Quinn and AV were two kind of very passive people, they weren't exactly screaming and yelling. So I think that something maybe comes with there's no fire under their ass throughout the whole season. But then when like it gets down to the end of it, they turn it up
because
like they need
the only
to.
people that Quinn holds accountable is Laff for some reason. He just like hates Lafreniere.
He's been one of the better Rangers as of late.
Like the kid plays
Him
like
and Kako. I don't know. Like
the kid plays like 12 minutes a night. Like if you're gonna be in this position where you're basically more or less, you know, you're on the ropes here, you're doing a rope-a-dope at the end of the season, like why wouldn't you just let the kids play it out and see if they can pull it off?
Tonight he's on the first line though with Mika, and the second line is Kreider, Hedel, and Kako. So we're gonna have to see what happens in this Ranger game tonight.
I think that's still a third line because they still left the strong.
No, they changed the lines today.
Well, yeah, they moved. They just flipped.
Yeah.
They just flipped Lafreniere for Kreider. They didn't change anything else. So like those other two, the other lines are all still intact. So like Strome and Panarin are still like the number 2 line.
No, I was talking to someone earlier, and
I read the Newsday article with the lineup tonight. I read the projected lineup. I read what you read.
Let's see.
okay.
I'm just saying.
Usually Brooksy tweets out their lines before the game
Colin
starts.
Stevenson tweeted it earlier too.
Let's see. Let's see what Brooksy's got to say. I hate Brooksy, by the way, but let's see what he's got to say. Did he block me? No, there he is.
Brooksy's like, what's it called?
Says, per Quinn, Laff and Kreider will flip places tonight. 13-93-89. So the top line is Laff, Z, Booch, 20-72-24. So Kreider, Hedel. That was 24. Is that
Kako. They just left the kid line intact. Just flipped the 2 players.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's what I was saying.
But I doubt. So Kreider's going down to the third line then, because yeah. Okay, so Kreider's going down to the third line. Lapp is going up to the first line. The second line's staying the same. Because there's no way you're not putting Panarin in the top 6. You'd literally lose your job over that. Okay. I mean, unless he wants to speed run unemployment, like he could just be like, "Oh, Panarin to the fourth line." It's like, yeah, here's your sign this paper, please.
Here's your walking slips.
Yeah, I mean, the East Division is definitely interesting. The funniest part, I think the East Division is definitely the closest because, the first team out and the first team in is only 6 points, and really from the Rangers to the Capitals, who are leading divisions, only a 10-point swing. Whereas other divisions like the North Division, it's a 20-point swing. The Central is a 15-point swing, and in the West, it's a 14-point swing. The East is definitely, I think, the tightest division, and it's still not decided. Like, none of these teams are safe. You have 62 points for the Caps, 62 for the Islanders, and 61 for the Penguins, and 58 for the Bruins. Like, none of these teams are safe. So it's definitely going to be an interesting race down the stretch for that division. I do think, ultimately, the Islanders and the Caps have a 3-point swing against each other. I think the Capitals are going to win the division. I think they're going to end up in first place, but there's no guarantee anywhere because the Bruins are 4 points out of first, but they have 2 games in hand. So there's your 4 points.
Yeah, and the Penguins are only 1 game back, and they're tied. Yeah, well, they're tied in games played and 1 point back.
So it's definitely an interesting division. I do want to get your guys' thoughts on something that I put in our group chat the other day. Justin Bourne, shout out to Borny on the Sportsnet podcast. I love your work with Anthony Stewart and Jeff Merrick. He tweeted out, it's 3/4 of the way through the season. What are your final thoughts on the North Division this year? And my thoughts, and I tweeted out, I said, very entertaining, but competitively underwhelming just because I don't really see any of these teams as legitimate Stanley Cup contenders. I would put the Jets and the Leafs as dark horse Stanley Cup contenders, like bubble Stanley Cup contenders, but you don't have a Tampa Bay Lightning or really take any of your pick at the top 4 teams in the East, or a Vegas and Colorado in this division, I don't think.
Yeah.
So, 3/4 of the way through the season, what do you guys think about this all-Canadian division? Like, did you enjoy watching it? Do you think it's boring? Are you over it? What are your thoughts?
I mean, I kind of was over it after the first couple of weeks when I realized these teams are just getting free wins out of Ottawa and, Vancouver and Ottawa were dishing out easy wins at the first half of the season, so it was impossible to judge how good this division actually was because Montreal beat up Vancouver 4 times in a week and looked like they were the hottest team in the league, and then it came crashing back down to earth.
Which Toronto, I would like to say, by the way, I called. Just saying. I did call Montreal.
Toronto has been red hot, but it's only because Austin Matthews has already scored 30 goals. Like, the guy's winning games on his own.
He's disgusting.
Winnipeg's the only mostly complete team here, and Edmonton's a glass cannon. So it's like everybody else. I mean, I don't know what's wrong with Calgary, but we've been saying that for years. Like, Calgary just can never get
score.
it.
They just can't score.
Like, how can't you score? You have Johnny Gaudreau, who's a 2-time 100-point scorer. You have Sean Monahan, 3-time 30-goal scorer. Like,
their depth on the wings is kind of questionable, I think, because your second-line players are Mangiapane and Dubé, which are serviceable, but better off on the third line.
Is like Mark Giordano's taken like a huge step back over the last 2 years, and they let his usual partner walk. Was it TJ Brody?
TJ Brody went to the Toronto Maple Leafs.
I mean, I think this is a team that really could have benefited from signing Tyson Barrie over the Oilers, honestly, because they had a real clear need for an offensive defenseman, whereas the Oilers were like, we're just going to keep adding scoring weapons for Connor McDavid and see what happens.
I did like the addition of Chris Tanev to this lineup. I think that his addition takes away some of those minutes from Giordano on the penalty kill, lessens his workload, but I think the more I watch this team, the more I realize, like, you have 4 really good offensive players. You have Monahan, Lindholm, Gaudreau, and Tkachuk. And after that, it's kind of a bunch of guys who you can put on the second line. Like, Mangiapane and Dubé you can put on the second line in a pinch, but do you want them there? Lucic is in a similar situation. Do you want him on your second line? Not really. And they're suffering from a very distinct lack of depth on the wings, I think. And they've been getting exposed. I mean, dude, they've lost 4 straight games to the Ottawa Senators. Like, I don't...
And it's not to take away from Ottawa, but, like, come on.
If you're going to be a playoff team, you should And this goes back to an interesting point. When the Islanders went on their 10-game win streak, it was like Mickey Mouse win streak. They beat the Sabres 4 times. But it's like, yeah, that's why they're there. Those teams are there for you to beat up on. So yeah, the Calgary Flames should be beating up on the Ottawa Senators.
You should take every opportunity. If you're guaranteed easy games with teams that are bottom feeding, you should 100% take them.
And I think the Canadian division, in my opinion, is arguably the weakest, just because there's no real bona fide contenders, I don't think. But I mean, I still enjoyed it. I had a lot of I love watching Toronto, Edmonton 8 times a year, because watching Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner go.
I think the Jets are a contender. And I think
what I mean by bona fide is top, I'm talking Tampa Bay Lightning level of contenders. And I don't really see any of these teams as doing that, honestly. If I had to pick right now and say my bona fide Stanley Cup contenders, I would say Tampa Bay. I would say a healthy, big asterisk next to that, a healthy Colorado Avalanche lineup. I would say I'm going to put Carolina in a borderline just because I still don't like the goaltending. I know Peter Mraz's been playing great this year. I know he has been. Don't get me wrong, Hurricanes fans. I love everything about your roster.
What happens when he gets injured in the playoffs like he does every other year?
I love everything about this Hurricanes roster. I really do. Up and down the lineup, depths, centers, wingers, defensemen, everything. There's something about Mrazek that just rubs me the wrong way because he hasn't proven that he can do it yet.
I mean, it doesn't help that every year in the playoffs he misses 4 games to injury, so...
I wouldn't put anybody in the East as bona fide contenders, but I would say all 4 of the top 4 teams are definitely the
dark
bubbles.
Horses.
Yeah. So I would say my bona fide contenders right now are the Lightning and a healthy Colorado Avalanche. I think those are the top 2. I think the rest of these teams have question marks that would make me hesitate from calling them, because I think that those 2 teams are.
You don't like Florida?
My question for Florida is, and I hate to say it because he's been playing good this year, but is Bob back? Is the big question mark. And I know they have Chris Driedger and even, friggin' Spencer Knight. By the way, shout out to Spencer Knight, won his first game in the NHL. Also, started the podcast. I just want to give a quick mention to Patrick Marleau. Breaks the NHL games played record, new NHL games played of all time. So wonderful, wonderful career for Patrick Marleau. Just want to give a quick shout out to him. Great guy, one of the nicest people, one of the best teammates you could ever have, from what everyone said. So couldn't happen to a better guy, honestly.
My other question mark with the Florida Panthers is can this depth continue to score the way it is? I mean, Patrick Hornquist is having a breakout year, as if he was 25, and then you have Connor Verhaeghe playing he's never played before in his entire career. This is such an anomaly.
I also don't like going into the playoffs with Ekblad. And I think that they made an honest effort at the deadline to address that. But that's still Aaron Ekblad, man. It's the same reason why I don't feel as good about the Islanders this year, because you don't have Anders Lee. And as good as Kyle Palmieri is, he's not Anders Lee. He doesn't do the same things that Anders Lee does. So that to me is a question mark going into the playoffs. That's why
Travis Zajac has looked good though.
I like Travis Zajac a lot. Palms has had some issues. He's been iffy, hasn't really gotten going on a scoring touch yet, but that also might be just because he's playing on the Islanders. We play a very defensive system, but I don't know. As far as the Canadian division goes, there's obvious questions about the toughness of the Toronto Maple Leafs. If they get run out of the building every night in the playoffs.
Even outside of that, their ability to defend.
The Jets, I think, are as close as you come to a complete team. But the question mark there is the young defense. Not very experienced in the playoffs. Not a lot of, run time in the postseason. And you're also missing Blake Wheeler. It's another big question mark for them. So I think, let me phrase it to you this way. Would it surprise me to see the Maple Leafs or the Jets lifting the Stanley Cup? No. It would not surprise... it wouldn't shock me. It would surprise me a little bit, but it wouldn't shock me. It would shock me to see the Oilers or the Canadiens lifting the Cup, though. That I would be blown away by. Because if you can carry Mike Smith, who... Forget his numbers for a second. When you watch the game, he's still the same Mike Smith. He's still letting in these fluky, questionable goals. You can forget his win numbers and his goals against and save percentage. The eye test on him still sucks, and it sucks out loud. And my question mark there is, when you get down to it, because one of these teams is going to at least the third round, just by nature of how this works, right? How the playoffs are working this year. When it comes down to a third round matchup, do you trust Mike Smith in a 1-goal game in like a game 7?
Nah.
No.
Not for as far as I can throw him. Especially when you consider that he's going to be playing against potentially goalies like, I don't know, Andrei Vasilevsky, or like, I don't know, maybe either one of Marc-Andre Fleury or Robin Lehner. It's like, who would I rather have in net? I would rather have Vitek Vanacek or Samsonov rather than Mike Smith.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Like, I'm not going to go as far as say Tristan Jarry or Casey DeSmith because like, meh. But
I'll take Devin Dubnyk too.
I mean, I think that's a big thing for the Avalanche this year too. Is like if Grubauer gets hurt, you not only do you have Francouz, but you also have Devin Dubnyk now.
Who's been there, done that.
So,
Not to say that he's anything special with his.
No, but he's got the experience at least.
Yeah.
and to go to the Canadiens, I mean, do I really need to justify my lack of faith in the Montreal Canadiens?
If the Canadiens do it, it'll come down to one man and one man alone.
Carey Price.
Yep.
And
I mean,
quite
he almost did it
honestly,
last year.
and Tim and I talked about this last week. I would absolutely love it to see Carey Price lift that Stanley Cup. I think that if there's any, because we always talk about those guys that are like on these teams that are like, oh, who deserves the Stanley Cup, right?
Yeah.
I think if I had to pick any one of these teams to win right now, besides the Islanders, obviously, I might pick the Canadiens just because I love Carey Price and I think he deserves it for the years and years of like total lack of support he's gotten from this team.
The torture he's gotten from the press.
And the one good chance he had, he got blown out.
Well, his knee got blown out. But I think
that is what I meant. I meant like he got blown out of the crease. Like he just got.
Yeah, I wonder who did that. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really like any of these Canadian teams, to be quite frank about it. Like,
Can't say I do either, to be honest.
I like the Jets, but that's just my pick.
okay, I do like the Jets in terms of the fact that they are the most complete, I think. But
I think the Jets aren't that far off from comparing. Like, there's clearly a difference in some of the skills of players. Actually, I don't even think it's that far off with them and the Hurricanes. I think they're that division's Hurricanes.
You're not saying that they're the same level of team, right?
I'm saying compare what they do.
Okay, I was gonna say they're definitely not on the same level, but if you're comparing
No, because that third line and fourth line are on Winnipeg are not this comparative to the Hurricanes.
Well, the defense, like the Hurricanes have one of the best defenses in the league.
So yeah, I'm not saying that they're the same team, but
I will agree with you though. I do think that they're only like maybe a top 4 defenseman and like a third line center away from being complete again, which ironically they bought in Paul Stastny to be that second line center, and then he they traded away the guy they bought in to play with them. So
yeah.
I mean, he's been good, but I do think that they're only like a top 4 defenseman and like, again, maybe like a third line center away from being complete. I like everything else about the team.
Yeah, no, then they've been good. I mean, the goaltending's fucking lights out.
I mean, it's Connor Hellebuck, like, Steve. It's funny because Steve, you said earlier, I think we were doing a halfway mark podcast that you would consider giving Connor Hellebuck a look for the Vezina, and at the time, outside of his wins, I thought his stats were just I thought it was just okay, but I mean, here he is again, a 2.5 and a 9.19 on a questionable Winnipeg Jets
his
defense.
numbers aren't like gonna blow you out of the water, but like combined with 21 wins, which is tied for 3rd in the league, it's very clear how hard he's carrying this team.
Especially when you look at the guys he's behind. It's like he's behind Vasilevsky, who
how many starts does he have also?
I think he
I'm
might have close
sure.
to he might be close to the top of the league.
That's
Because he's carrying, because Eric Comrie's not playing a lot.
I'm not taking anything away from Andrei Vasilevsky. One of the best goaltenders in the league. But
he's
he
playing
does
against
play for the
best
Tampa Bay
team.
Lightning.
He's playing one of the best team in the league, bro. Like,
Same thing. I'm not taking anything away from Grubauer. Not taking anything away from Fleury.
he's played 36 games. Not to cut you off, but he's tied for first with Vasilevsky for 36 games at most
Yeah,
played.
so he's 21 and 15, which like to have a winning record on this team.
And it's probably
Especially-
split between overtime and playoff.
Also, something to
regulation,
consider
so.
there is he's playing in a division that has arguably the most scoring in the league.
Well,
When
yeah,
you're playing against the Leafs, the Oilers, I mean, even the Canucks, they don't really defend well right now, but they can score. Even the Sens are good for a couple 4 or 5 goal games.
Here's that's funny you brought up the Canucks. There's another reason why I don't think this the Canadian division is all that fair or that interesting. Is if you look at the disparity in games played now between the Canucks and the rest of that division, it's okay, but the Canucks have 8 games in hand on a lot of these teams. It's kind of ridiculous. And I mean, I understand why, right? By virtue, they literally could not play. The entire roster was on the COVID list, but it's just goes to show these games are going to carry let's just say the Canucks get red hot, right? And they win all their makeup games, and then they win the games that they were already scheduled for. So now their season's ending 2 weeks later than everybody else's already anyway. So where everybody else goes inactive, the Canucks have a chance realistically to knock a team out of the playoffs if they struggle going down this stretch. So it's such a strange and crapshoot in the North. Because you said, the Canadiens are looking good, right? They should be the 4th seed. Calgary's kind of done and out, right? They're too far behind. But Vancouver being 10 points back with 8 games in hand, which is or it's not 8 games, but
They have 5, so they have those 10 points.
yeah, they have all 10 points on the board still, whereas Calgary doesn't. Calgary doesn't have those extra games.
They're 8 points back with a game not in hand. The Canadiens have a game in hand.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely interesting. The thing that's really unfortunate is I think if there were more competitive teams in this division, this could be the most exciting division to watch. If
It wasn't made of all glass cannons, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the East Division, right, the 6th team in the East Division has 8 more points than the Canucks. And the Canucks had technically 6 games in hand over the Flyers, but it's just, if the North Division had the competitive level of the East Division, I think this would be the most exciting division in hockey to watch, honestly. If you had arguably 6 teams that could compete for the top spot, because realistically speaking, if the Rangers played the way they have recently through the start of the season, they would be competing for the top spot.
Yeah, I mean, to your point too, the division seems to just be so weak because are you really going to tell me that 49 points is a convincing amount to have at the 3/4 mark here when everybody else is over 6, getting all the good teams are getting over 60 already, and teams that are out of the playoffs are in the high 50s. If Montreal were in the division they are normally in, they based on where all the other teams that are in their division normally are, they wouldn't even be sniffing a playoff spot. They would be nowhere near a playoff spot. So they're just lucky. And that's also what I mean too when I'm talking about how the North Division isn't all that interesting, because it's masking a lot of these teams to make them look good when we go back to our normal format next year. Montreal is not going to be competing with Toronto or Boston the way that they are this year. I mean, they're gonna have to play Boston 6 times and
play the Panthers, the Lightning.
Yeah, and this year it's you get to replace all those. Oh, guess what? You get to replace all those easy wins between you and the Canucks with you and the Bruins now. So have fun with that. And you get the Lightning and the Flyer and the Panthers, who've been red hot too. So good luck.
Yeah, because you're losing all 8 games of the Canucks. So, I mean
and you're also losing the easy games against Calgary too.
That Pacific Division next year,
it's gonna be garbage.
Is gonna be so bad. The Pacific Division next year is gonna be the Vegas Golden Knights.
The Canucks probably.
The Canucks. Well, if it goes back to the plan, right? It's going to be the Golden Knights, the Canucks, the 3 California teams.
The Kraken.
So, Vegas, Golden Knights, Canucks, 3 California. The Kraken, the Oilers, and the Flames.
Yeah.
Which, who's good besides the Golden Knights?
The Kraken have an outside shot of being good like the Golden Knights were out of their expansion draft, but I don't think they'll be as good.
The Kraken are going to be an interesting position because they're in a position that's actually pretty advantageous for an expansion team with the flat cap. Because players that teams might not necessarily otherwise want to give away, say a third line guy who's making $4 million, if it was in a year where the cap was rising, you might be we'll just eat the contract, right?
Mm-hmm.
But You can't with a flat cap. So they actually might get some halfway decent players. I don't think they're going to be as good because I just don't think there's as many good players available this year. Like, we knew Fleury was going to the Golden Knights. William Karlsson, Riley Smith. We saw a lot of these guys being available. I think that there's going to be a lot of teams trying to pawn off mediocre players with bad contracts as opposed to good players with bad contracts.
Yeah.
Like, a team like the Islanders isn't going to try to pawn off somebody like Josh Bailey with a $5 million contract. We're going to try to pawn off somebody like Leo Komarov, But, I mean, Jesus, the California teams are all in a rebuild. You have an expansion team coming in. You have the Oilers who can't seem to stop thinking it's 1982.
That being said, it's probably going to be a shit show, like a dumpster fire of a division. But, some of those games might be interesting just because the Kings and the Ducks have a lot of really exciting talent. I mean, Alex Turcotte, Trevor Zegras,
Jamie Drysdale,
Byfield
might make
Quentin Byfield, the winger from LA, the second round pick that slid out of the first round, Arthur Kaliev. They're gonna get a first round pick this year, which could turn into somebody like Owen Power, somebody of that caliber. So there's a lot to be excited about, honestly, with these California teams. It's just they're not gonna be good hockey games.
No.
So for what it's worth, I did a little research on the stats, and Tampa Bay and Winnipeg have arguably negligible stat differentials in just about every defensive category in terms of shots against, power play percentage, face-offs. They're all within a few positions of each other or just a couple points. The biggest differential was the shots against, which was 14th and 20-something place, but it was 30 shot. The number is, to be exact, Winnipeg is 30.8 and Tampa has 28.7 shots against per game. So I really think Connor Hellebuyck has a serious argument at that point, considering he's playing with a team that's maybe that actually hurts his argument more than anything. Let me rephrase that. It hurts his argument more than anything because his team is statistically is negligibly different.
Yes, but also I think when you look at the caliber of the players that he's playing with, nobody's gonna argue that the Lightning's defense is as good as the Jets, because the Jets' defense is clearly not as good as Tampa Bay.
That's actually the biggest stat. Let me rephrase what I said earlier. The biggest stat differential. The biggest stat differential is the goals for, where Tampa Bay has 152 and Winnipeg has 114. Not that that's or 144. Not that that's that big of a difference, but I mean,
I just think the eye test is overwhelmingly in favor of a guy like Connor Hellebuyck when you look at it. And it's Vasilevsky again. I don't want anybody to come at me think I'm taking anything away from Vasilevsky. He's one of the top 3 goalies in the league. But when you look at the team he's playing with, Connor Hellebuyck is not playing with the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Vasilevsky's facing a lot of outside shots, a lot of less opportune shots, whereas Hellebuyck is facing some more.
Big reason that the team even wins a lot of
nights.
Yeah,
100%. Yeah, that's why I think that goals for stat is a big difference.
Without Hellebuyck, if you replaced Hellebuyck with even just a starting caliber goaltender, this team would be worse than I think Calgary and Vancouver put together.
Probably.
So,
speaking of Calgary and Vancouver, so both teams to get new goaltenders in the offseason, and both goaltenders struggle mightily. I mean, so far, Braden Holtby lost his job to Thatcher Demko, which, was the plan, but not to happen this year.
Not immediately, yeah.
Not to play so bad you immediately lose your job.
Not to lose your job because the other one played better, but to lose your job because he played so bad.
I mean, Jacob Markstrom, for what it's worth, I think has been okay. But he hasn't been the guy that they thought they were getting, which was borderline Vezina caliber Jacob Markstrom.
And it's also the team in front of him isn't the same caliber of Vancouver was last year. I'd argue Vancouver was a better team last year than Calgary is this year, but
definitely the defense was better, I'd say.
Oh yeah.
I mean, let me put a little test out for you, and you guys at home that are listening. Besides Mark Giordano and Chris Tanev, can you name me the other Calgary defenseman?
No, because Travis Hamonic walked as a free agent. the hell? They have
Rasmus Anderson.
Yeah,
I think that's
Rasmus
the
Anderson.
only one everyone else either not even knows.
I knew they were going with like a youth movement, and like them by nature being on the West Coast, I don't really pay much attention anyway. Even less now that their playoff position doesn't affect us at all.
I know a lot of random third line defensemen who play on the second line power play from fantasy. So not to flame them, haha, that's a good pun, but they're not even producing, so I don't know them from like a stats perspective.
Youth movement when they have a team that like should be competing now.
Why would you let a guy like Eric Gustafsson walk away when he had one of his like highest producing seasons of his career for you guys, and you let him go to Philly, who didn't need him when you had a very clear need to address the production shortfall coming from your fucking number one defenseman who's 39 years old? Like, I know they have Noah Hannafin. That's another one, and that's the big one that everybody forgets about. I mean, they got Jake. Do they have Jake Bean? No. Jake Bean got traded, or Hayden Fleury got traded somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But, they have Noah Hannafin, who has all the potential. He's a really high ceiling, but he hasn't, like, shown any flashes of, like, getting close to that ceiling almost at all.
There's a way to integrate youth into a competing team. And I think the best example we've seen of that was the Blackhawks during their run from 2010 to 2015.
Even the Bruins of the last, 7-8 years have been good about it. There's a way to integrate the youth where not only do they contribute to the team, but their shortcomings don't hurt you that much. And I think the Calgary Flames totally botched it.
I think Pittsburgh did a pretty good job of that.
With the youth that they kept and didn't trade away, yeah. It seems like every other time the Pittsburgh Penguins have a guy who's like 23, 24, who's like just starting to break out, they're like, trade that, man. It's like, wait.
The only one they held on to was Jake Gensel, and that's because he was a long shot. They were like, he seems all right. And then he came in with just an absolute tank, and they were like, oh, okay, all right.
They took a young Carl Hagelin, though, and he played, I think he played better for them once he first left the Rangers.
Yeah, but I don't think he was that young. He was like 26, 27 when he left the Rangers.
He's technically a veteran on this team, which is kind of a crazy
thing. Now he is.
Now he's in his like late 30s, like 33, 34.
Well, now he's also on Washington.
Well, they traded because they can't afford to pay him because he got the contract from Anaheim.
Yeah.
And then they traded him to fucking Pittsburgh. Remember Ricard Raquel? That was fun. Not Ricard Raquel. Remember Emerson Edom?
Edom?
That was fun. I wish we would have got Ricard Raquel for him. God, that would have been sick. Ricard Raquel was like a 35 goal scorer twice.
It's very interesting to me to see what teams are able to successfully integrate youth into the roster and what teams don't. Like, I think, although they don't have much youth, I think the Islanders have done a pretty decent job at acclimating Noah Dobson. Wallstrom and Bellows have been in and out of the lineup, but that's just a Barry Trotz thing, right? Like, he's very protective of his young players and, to a certain extent, very critical.
Barzal's always put up points. He's having a bit of a rough go this season with his attitude, but getting in the way.
He needs to stop taking penalties. I don't know
his attitude's getting in the way a little bit, but he's still going out there and putting up points and looking like Barzal things.
And what I like about him is that he didn't balk at the ask of Barry Trotz to play a defensive system. Everyone saw his numbers dip. They were like, what happened? He was putting up 90 points a season. It was like, yeah, that's when he was playing under Doug Weight, who, like, there was no system under Doug Weight. It was just, hey, go try to score 6 goals, and hopefully they don't put up 7. So when his numbers dipped down to 60 points under Barry Trotz, everyone was like, what happened to him? It's like he's playing a Barry Trotz hockey. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
Also, like, he's not... I mean, he was also playing with John Tavares a lot on that number 1 power play that first year, which, like, let's be honest, he doesn't have a tool that is of John Tavares' caliber anymore. He doesn't have a trigger man like that he's working with.
Yeah, and it took a little while. Like, honestly, I think this year at the beginning of the season was the best we've ever seen from Barzal, Eberle, Lee. I think that line really, really clicked at the beginning of the year. Like, last year it was okay, but it wasn't producing at the same pace. Like, Anders Lee was on pace for like 40 goals this year.
Mm-hmm. Until he got hurt, yeah.
So, like, we haven't seen that click yet until the beginning of the season, but... certain teams integrate the youth pretty well. Calgary, not one of them. At least in a team like Vancouver's defense, you can look at them and say, all right, listen, they let Tyler Toffoli go. They let Tanev go. They let Markstrom go because they didn't want to get stuck with long-term contracts for these guys. understandable. In a couple of years, the Roussel contract is up, the Louis Erickson contract is up, the bad contracts are coming off the
It's not like
books.
you don't have young guys in the pipeline they're waiting on. I mean, they're waiting on Jet Wu and I'm trying to think who else they
Except
drafted.
Michael DiPietro.
They have Oli Ulevi.
Right, so like in Vancouver's defense, you're like, this was calculated. This was planned. They knew this was going to be a down year. They probably still thought they would compete for a playoff spot, but look, not competing, not the worst thing in the world. This was planned. Whereas you look at Calgary and you're like, holy shit. Like,
You look at Vancouver, and despite the game left difference, do you think of the daunting task that they have left and maybe decide to calm down on the season a little bit? Maybe
I mean, they're definitely going to be...
try and... Because as it stands points-wise, they're second to bottom in the division. And where are they in the league? What are they at? 39 points. So they're below just about every other team in the league besides the Devils, the Sabres, and Anaheim. So they're looking at a top 10 pick, or they're looking at a possible run that they don't maybe get into for the playoffs. So how do you feel about that?
I mean, I definitely think that they're going to be more cautious with some players. Like, Elias Pettersson still isn't playing. He's still on the IR. And I think they're going to be more cautious with him. They're going to let him take his time. They're going to let him fully recover from this injury, because why wouldn't you? Why are you going to rush a guy like Elias Pettersson back for a playoff run that, let's be honest, isn't happening?
Yeah.
Unless they go on the run of all runs, it's not happening. So
That being said, I don't think they're gonna like do the 1984 Penguins and like intentionally tank their way to a
no,
top
they're just
pick,
going to
but
be cautious. Like we saw the other night.
just play it smart. Like, guys need days off, take them out of the lineup.
That's what I'm saying.
Exactly.
If you're in a game,
Like, Quinn gets banged up one night, take him out the next night, let him sit on the.
It's,
you know what I'm saying?
It's not worth a kid being out for 4 to 6 months with surgery that is going to impact the rest of his career for a run that's not happening.
Maybe Hope he starts out. He gets
you run
he
Holtby
gets
a little
shelled
bit
a little
more.
early. You just leave him out there.
Mm-hmm.
Don't bother. Like if he gets shelled 3 early in the first or something, whereas you might change him and try and win the game, maybe just leave him in.
I wouldn't be if I was a Canucks. I wouldn't be afraid to throw Holtby in on back-to-backs. You know, like I would really try to lessen Demko's workload just because he carried a lot of it through the middle of the season, and we saw what happened last year when he saw like him carry that workload. He struggled a little bit, but he acclimated. But by the time they got to the playoffs, he was tired.
Mm-hmm.
Because like it's hard to go from playing 15, 20 games to playing 65 games and being like, and then however many you play in the playoffs, because you're getting every single start. So it's tough.
I would honestly bring Michael DiPietro up and give him a couple games. Just
Towards
run
I would
3
I would wait
goalies.
till you're officially like eliminated for that. You know what I'm saying? Wait till you're actually like the red lines through your
Yeah.
name, because otherwise it kind of sends the message where like we gave up. Where I think like the team doesn't want to send that message. Like very
Yeah.
clearly they're still trying to play and win games, but like
Once you're
It's an
eliminated,
interesting
like,
position to be in when
if Jet you want to take a 9-game look at Jet Wu, no one's gonna say, oh well, what are you
You
doing?
don't burn a year on his contract. You're like,
The last 9 games of the season, you want to see what he can do and see if he's ready for camp next year? Hey, fuck it. No one's going to blame you. I mean, the Blue Jackets are in the same position. I think the Red Wings are obviously in that position. The Red Wings are always in that position the last so many years. But
they're more or less eliminated. I mean,
yeah.
if the Predator, if the Stars, so
But like
for those of you that don't know, like I threw up the magic and tragic numbers. So like I'm assuming that you guys know the way that works, but if anybody doesn't know the way that works, the magic number is how many points either you need to gain or the first place or the first team out of the playoffs need to miss out on for you to clinch. And the tragic number is either the points that you need. If you miss out on a combination of either you miss out on or the 4th place team gains, you miss the playoffs. So realistically, for the Red Wings and the Jackets, if they either miss out on 5 points or the Stars gain 5 points at any point the rest of the season, or a combination of both, you're out. So you're out. There's no like.
But I think like the Flyers are even in like the same situation, right? Because they're at a 20-point gap now, because they need the magic trash number is 20 for them, right? So, for them, I'd be taking looks at a kid like Cam York. Like, what's the difference, right? Like, start putting guys in the lineup and seeing what they can do. I mean, you're not going to make the playoffs. It's very obvious at this point. Like, that 6-week stretch you had was absolutely atrocious.
Brutal.
I mean, you lost to the Rangers. You gave up 7 spots to the Rangers 4 times, 2 of which were over 8 goals.
I think they got blown out. It was like 16-2 over the course of those 2 games or something
Yeah,
like that.
the first one was like 8-2, and it was 7-2, and the other one was 9-0.
Yeah, so 16-2 is like that's
Absolutely
just
atrocious.
Not
And
not good.
so speaking of the Flyers,
not good.
I was talking to a guy recently, like a Flyer fan. He was talking about how Carter Hart is very obviously not ready, and he's the reason that they're having all these struggles. And I was like sitting there like,
what games are you watching,
yeah,
dude?
in my head, I was like, what do you mean he's not ready? He carried you to Game 7 of the second round last year as a 20-year-old rookie and looked like a fucking Vezina candidate doing it.
He's not ready. He hasn't unlocked the 30th chromosome to gain the Force and teleport from post to post.
No, it's because he's not Bernie Perron and hasn't just backstopped them to a Stanley Cup like
That's what I'm saying.
out of his ass.
He hasn't figured out how to phase walk in the net.
Yeah, he
you
hasn't
know
figured out
what
to be a
that
god
tells
yet.
me about that guy is he hasn't watched any Flyers games all year.
I mean, like I said, I always bring up when the Rangers blew them out 9-0, when they pulled hard after their first 3 goals, the first 4 goals, 3 of them came on absolutely like no chance plays. A bang play from post to post twice, a deflection in front, and a backdoor tap in. How are any of these Carter Hart's fault? Like, you're gonna tell me that he's not ready? What about him doesn't say he's ready? I mean, he carried you to Game 7 last year. He won a gold medal twice with Team Canada. Like, he has ice in his veins. Like, there's...
If you're a Flyers fan and you're listening to this podcast, just seriously, and don't take this as me like talking down to you. I want you to genuinely, next time you watch a Flyers game, or go back and watch some of the old ones, draw an invisible line from the goal line out through the center of the ice to about where the face-off dots are, and just watch. That's called the line of no return. If a pass crosses that line, the goalie's save percentage drops by like 15 to 20% or something like that. Watch how many goals Carter Hart is giving up that are crossing that line, or are shots from the slot, or a deflection right in front. Like, just genuinely watch these games, and if you genuinely watch how many goals are across that line, or a shot in the trapezoid of no return, which is another term, or a deflection in front, and you still think Carter Hart is the reason, I'm sorry, but you do not understand how the sport of hockey works.
I mean,
or at the very least, you don't understand how goaltending works.
I mean, if you really want to look at it, just take the look at what happened last year. Like, look at the Flyers' defensive coverage last year compared to what they're doing this year. I mean, Carter Hart was facing a similar number of shots, but a lot of them were not dangerous, and now he's facing the same number of shots, just from a more dangerous location, and guess what? He's giving up more goals. It's almost like you would expect something like that. Like...
You can argue that when you're a goalie who makes it to the National Hockey League, you're expected to make some saves that you shouldn't, which is totally understandable. But you're not expected to make 13 cross-crease saves a night, which is what the Flyers are giving up. I mean, I'm sorry. If you look at the Flyers, the trapezoid if you draw a line from the posts to the face-off dots and then connect them, that trapezoid is free range. There is no defense being played in that trapezoid by the Flyers.
And you know what? Even let's say they start playing defense tonight, let's say. Or tomorrow, they figure out how to play defense, right? And they, let's say, and Carter Hart, and they still go in, and Carter Hart plays like dog shit. It's still not even his fault, because you let him go out there and get shit on, absolutely destroyed, and killed every bit of confidence, every bit of positioning that he thought he had, everything he thought he was doing right. You pretty much told him, no, they're going to score anyway. So even if the Flyers started playing defense magically, or at some point in, let's say, even halfway through the season they did, you still let him go out there and get shelled the first half of the season and get absolutely dumpstered.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be shaky, like he also must feel like at some point he probably has the mentality of like, which isn't good to have as a goaltender. Like they probably go down early in games, and he probably has a thought to himself where he's like, all right, well now I have to move a mountain to win this one.
All right,
you know
here's
I mean?
another one. Cracks his knuckles, and he's like Goku. He's essentially what he has to do.
Yeah, like so, and that's not a healthy mentality to have either. Like that's gonna drain you on after a while too, because it's gonna be taxing to be like, oh my god, I gave a goal, and now like I can't give up anything else. Like I literally have to be perfect for the rest of the night. Do you know
who I think is an interesting look at that kind of? And I don't know. I don't want to say this because this is a very early, or I don't want to say that this is in concrete because it's an early statement to make in his career. But I think we're kind of seeing that with Jordan Binnington freaking the fuck out this year. Absolutely just off his rocker.
Binnington just doesn't know how to handle like
adversity. Well, I'm saying though, I think that part of that comes with.
Oh yeah.
He's been doing it for so long, and last year it worked. The year before.
Just before we go on to like the Blues, because I do want to talk about the Blues because they're an interesting team for the rest of this for the rest of the run as well.
I was just saying, I think think that's kind of the path that he might be
to say that Carter Hart isn't ready is also completely ignoring any of the games that Brian Elliott has played in, which you still weren't winning, and Elliott's stats are still awful.
They're worse than Carter Hart's.
The Flyers' expected goals against, both their goalies are in the bottom 10 of the NHL. Mm-hmm. So it's not just Carter Hart, because if it was just Carter Hart, then Brian Elliott would have okay stats. He doesn't. His stats suck. Your team can't defend. They suck.
That's like when people point to the Oilers and they say, like, they use that comparison. Like, well, you know, the Oilers are pretty good. It's like both their goaltenders are just, like, always near the bottom of the expected goals against. Like, they cannot defend.
And I know that stats aren't everything, and I hate stats nerds that are like, well, actually, the Islanders aren't good because... Or they're like, actually, the Red Wings are the best team in the NHL because of their core side. Listen, the eye test for the Flyers sucks. The stats test for the Flyers suck. The stats test for both their goalies suck. Stop blaming it on Carter Hart like it's his fault that you can't defend a trapezoid.
It's time to call a spade, right? Like, if it smells like shit and it looks like shit, it must be shit. Like, sorry.
And speaking of shit, are the Blues just not a good team anymore? What are we seeing from the St. Louis Blues? I mean, right now, they are technically, quote-unquote, out of a playoff spot, but they're only 1 point back with 4 games in hand on the Coyotes. But, I mean, that's still a far cry from where they ought to be. Are the Blues just bad?
If you would have told me 6 months ago that the St. Louis Blues were going to be trailing both the Minnesota Wild and the Arizona Coyotes for a playoff spot, I would have told you you're crazy. But I think really looking at it, I mean, they lost probably a top 3 defenseman in the NHL. They had no Tarasenko for most of the season, who's their number. I mean, I didn't think the Blues were going to be great. I really didn't think they were going to be all that good anymore. I really thought like losing Pietrangelo was big. I mean, replacing him with Krug is nice, but it just, I thought like their Stanley Cup to me was like a fluke almost. Like they just got so red hot that like there was nothing going to stop them. Like it was just destiny. And like the reality is like this is the real team. Like the team we saw last year and the team we're seeing this year is like a real accurate reflection of this roster, which is they're like an aging, mediocre, like middle of the road hockey team. Like, I mean, Ryan O'Reilly's not young anymore. He's like 29 or 30 years old, and he spent most of his career playing in, you know, crap like shithole franchises. Like now that the franchise is
they also of Colorado.
Yeah,
they also went without Tarasenko for the whole first.
Well, yeah,
but
they signed Mike Hoffman, and he's done nothing.
He just like basically
disappeared.
Might as well not exist.
He's making $4 million to literally do nothing. Like, and that's a guy I really thought like I was really high on. Like Mike Hoffman's produced everywhere he's went ever in his career, and I wonder if it's just a reflection. Like,
do you think the GMs know something we don't? Because it took him so long to get a contract, and then he got signed, and the coach doesn't use him. Is there like some secret that weird? I mean, listen, we knew his wife. I wonder, not to talk bad about anybody's wife, but like it's a bona fide fact that his wife was kind of a cancer. Person,
yeah,
not a good person at all. Terrible human.
Because what she did to Erik Karlsson, yeah, that was awful. But so.
Do you think that like?
Well, no. I think here's what the problem with Mike Hoffman is, right? Mike Hoffman isn't a guy that generates offense on his own. Never has been. He's always a guy that rides shotgun with like a center iceman who passes the puck and gives him the puck. I mean, you look at him in Florida. He played with Alex Barkov. He played with for a while he played with Vinny Trocheck. Pass first kind of center iceman. So he was always the number one trigger option here. But now when Tarasenko was out, he was the number one trigger option, but he still didn't play well. And I think it's more or less like he doesn't mesh with the style of game that St. Louis plays. St. Louis is a very heavy, grinded out, we're in your face, we're going to wear you down type of game.
West Coast team.
Yeah, like they can't skate that well. They're not that fast. Mike Hoffman's like a, run and gun, like I'm up and down the wing shooting, That's kind of what he's looking for, and I just don't think it's a fit. I mean, you saw it like Anthony Duclair had the same thing happen to him. Like he was the same kind of player. He was a running gun. He had really good stats in Ottawa. Then he got traded last year at the deadline, and went to a team that he didn't fit with and did nothing,
Yeah, I mean he's having a good year this year with Florida, but
that's what I'm saying. Like Florida matches a little better.
Like, it's just so weird because we were talking. Mike Hoffman was like the biggest free agent name last year. We were like, he's gonna be the guy, that's gonna be going in the first 2 days, and it took him like 2-3 weeks to get. I just feel like there's something that we're not seeing. Maybe it's a mentality thing. Maybe GMs just look at him like, I just don't like the way this guy operates.
I wonder if there's like some sort of crazy fancy stats because all the NHL teams now have like these crazy stat departments. Yeah. I wonder if they're looking at some of his numbers and just like seeing a trend that we don't see because we're not analytics guys. Like we're not like picking and choosing like every course I know.
Fenwick is really good.
I'm gonna be honest with you. When I look at numbers, like some of these fancy stats, the only ones I fully like 100% grasp is expected goals for and expected goals against, because it is the most self-explanatory stat in the planet. You are expected to score this many goals and you're expected to give up this many, right? Corsi, like the amount of shots generated versus shots against, combined with your time on ice and your plus minus, like believe me, I couldn't tell you how to calculate it. I don't know. But I wonder if they're looking at all these like crazy, like super fine, like analytical details, like down to like like what they do in baseball, like down to like the at bat almost, to see like maybe he's just not the player they thought he was. Like maybe he's not all that great,
or maybe he's good, but he's not worth what he's asking for. You know.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to kind of clarify something I said a little earlier. Stats have a place in hockey. Don't get me wrong. And advanced analytics 100% have a place in hockey. I just think that because hockey is so much of a back and forth, it's so much of a flow, it's not as useful as in a sport like baseball, where it's a series of decisions.
Moneyball.
Or even football, where every play is self-contained.
Yeah, like,
you know,
there's a definite start and end point for every play.
Right.
There's no also random factors of guy tripping, no penalty, puck bouncing,
taking a big hit and the puck shooting in the air and doing something
like
crazy.
Puck rolling off your stick and just you healing it.
Yeah, you just can't account for all the crazy stuff.
I do want to say that, don't get me wrong, don't think I'm sitting here saying like, oh, stats are very useful. But you have to combine the stats with the eye test. I think that, and I honestly, I genuinely think the eye test is more important most of the time. But you have to have a combination of the two. So don't get me wrong, I'm not saying stats are for nerds or anything, but you can't just point to a guy's stats and be like, he's the best player in the league, because he might just suck, but he might be playing. Like, I think Ryan Strom's a perfect example. I think Ryan Strom's he's a solid second line center. Is he an 82-point producer without Artemi Panarin and maybe
Absolutely
with like
not.
A mid-level second line player? Probably not.
No. But I think like it's like Tyson Barrie. Everybody pointed to like his fancy stats in Toronto, like, oh look at all the good things he's doing. It's like, right, but like if you watch the games, he's an absolute train wreck. So
Can
like
he defend?
So it's like, okay, I'm glad Tyson Barrie, like, that whole situation was stupid to me, because like everybody seemed to just immediately forget what kind of player Tyson Barrie was when he got traded to Toronto. Like, he's gonna help them defend, he's gonna make them a better team, and it's like, did you not watch him play in Colorado at all? Like, he scored 60 points. Like, that's not a guy that's playing defense.
Like, what Avs team were you watching?
Were you watching the team that I was watching? Was getting shelled like 8-0 a night before like they grew into the team they are now. Like, because we're going back like the Matt Duchene, Ryan O'Reilly era, where they were bad, like bad.
Which is what led to them getting guys like Rantanen and McKinnon.
Yeah, and Sam Girard, and that he's underrated, man. Sam Girard's a guy that's quietly flying under the radar that I've been really like high on the last couple of years.
Everyone's like, kill McGar.
But everybody forgets, like, Sam Girard got there first. Like, they traded for him first, and I think, who did they trade for him? It was with Nashville, because they got him from Nashville. Was it? No, it wasn't Matt Duchene. It was part of a 3-way trade they facilitated. I think it was part of the Matt Duchene trade to Ottawa.
Sam Girard.
I'm pretty sure it was like a 3-team trade.
Let's see what his trade history is. But, and again, I talk a lot about Cale Makar and how I don't think he's as good as everyone says he is. Don't get me wrong, okay? Cale Makar is a fantastic defenseman. Absolutely a top 2 defenseman on the right team. But let's not sit here and pretend he defends like Victor Hedman or Jacob Slavin, because that's what everyone thinks. Everyone's like, he defends as well as anybody in the league. It's like, what? Who? If the rest of the league is comprised of Michael Del Zotto, then maybe. But like,
I mean, yeah, because Cale, like, I don't know. I've said it before on the podcast. Like, all the hype around Cale Makar just really just drives me nuts. Just because, like, it's not like they're just talking him up. It's always at the expense of like these other young defensemen that they're like, oh, Cale Makar's the league's better than this guy, and it's like,
Cale Makar better than Quinn Hughes. Like, really? Because Quinn Hughes is better in the neutral zone and the defensive zone, and arguably quarterbacks a power play better. So,
and honestly puts up similar numbers. I mean, up until he got sick and the team went on hiatus, he was a point-per-game player for most of the season.
To answer your question, Sam Girard and Vladislav Kamenev were dealt with a second-round pick in a 3-team trade to the Colorado Avalanche in exchange for a Kyle Turris from the Ottawa Senators.
Okay. That's what it was. I remember it was one of the centerman trades they made.
You mean one of the 8 million playmaking centers at Nashville for some reason
Yeah,
just like
I knew it
loads
was-
up their roster with.
And I think they're probably really kicking themselves over that, right? Because they got Kyle Turris, who was okay for them for a couple years, but now look at Sam Girard blossoming into like a top, like he's like the perfect number 3 defenseman on a team. Like
Seth Jones for Philip Forsberg.
no, Seth
Jones for
Ryan Johansson.
It's like, ooh.
To be fair, though, that trade did work. The trade worked out in both teams' favor at first because Nashville stayed really competitive, and like he did look like he was going to be that number 1 center. But then he got that back injury and was never the same. Like he got injured in the playoffs, and hasn't been the same since.
And that's not to take anything away from Kyle Turris. I think Kyle Turris is a great second-line playmaking center.
Well, he was, yeah.
But he's not Seth Jones, so
He's also not
even
Sam.
close.
It's also just like, I mean, it's hard.
He's not playing 62 minutes. And
He's not a top 3 defenseman in the league. What?
It's just, I guess it's also hard to rate because like they were in a different position, right? Like they weren't looking to sit and wait on Sam Girard the way that they had to. Whereas Colorado's like, we got time, man. Like we're terrible, so like he can come play all the minutes he needs.
Suck.
But I mean, you know who else has been really surprising for Colorado? Ryan Graves. I mean, I know he was good for them last year, and I know the Rangers gave up on him. But like the player he is now is not the player that played for the Rangers.
He's playing well this season.
He's playing really well, and he's got a lot of bite. He's got a lot of snarl to his game, and he can skate. He can really skate. Like I think he won the fastest skater competition in the AHL when he was still a Ranger. But like, it leaves me to think like, where was this guy when the Rangers had him? Like, what? Like, it's not like, and I'm not like saying the Rangers made a bad call by letting him go because it's like he just did not have any of this to his game up to this point. But it's just such like a. Because like he's the kind of
like
defenseman the Rangers need,
really,
you know.
Yeah.
Like he's not
Clowns.
very big, but
Well, it's funny. Tim and I were talking about Neil Pionk is the same situation. Like when he was traded off the Rangers, the Jets brought him in to be this like offensive power play specialist, and yet for some reason he's somehow turned into like Connor McDavid's kryptonite. Like this guy shuts down Connor McDavid every time they play against each other.
He had the same role when he was a Ranger. It was just like he's the only few defenders in the league that can like keep up with him skating backwards. Because, like, Neil Pionk is so fast. I mean, we all remember that rush he made against Montreal where he made them look like they eat soup with a fork. Like, he did a spinorama at the blue line on 2 guys, and they both were like,
I was saying earlier in the season for my Norris Trophy, and he's still my...
He's a dark horse. He's in my top 5 for Norris Trophy voting, definitely. Just because, like, the minutes he's logging and, like, how he's, like, become...
And he's playing against the best players, and he's shutting them down.
He's
crazy.
playing... That
not...
North Division has probably some
the
of
most firepower in it, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Without a doubt.
Offensively, like,
because that's all it is. It's as we've discussed.
All
It's
offense.
It has the 2 highest powered offensive teams in the league in it with Toronto and Edmonton. I mean, you're facing Mitch Marner, Austin Matthews, and Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl.
And even then, like on Montreal, you're facing Toffoli this season.
Josh Anderson has been good for them.
Anderson. You're
I mean, the Canucks top 6 is kind of nasty.
Yes, when they're healthy, yeah. You've Pedersen and Horvat.
Even the Senators. Even Senators don't have bad picks like players.
Oh yeah,
on them.
no. I mean,
Stützle.
Timmy T has been real good this year. Okay, listen. I'm gonna say it. I've been saying it all year, and I'm finally just gonna say it. I like Lafreniere. I understand why the Rangers took him. He's going to be a better player in the long run. But if that season had continued into like, if the season had continued and not gotten paused, I really think Tim Stützle would have jumped Alex Lafreniere as the number 1 overall pick, just because he's a center iceman, and center icemen are so hard to find. How many drafts do you have where you have like 3 or 4 scoring wingers in the top 5? Every single one. Literally every single one. Last year we had Alexander Holtz, Lucas Raymond, and this year we have Dylan Guenther and Matthew Savoy. Well, Matthew Savoy's a center, but you know what I'm saying? Like, they're 3 of the same kind of player. They're speedy scoring wingers. Lafreniere, big, speedy scoring winger. Timothy Stützle is 5'10", like center iceman with the most disgusting set of hands, some of the best vision on the ice. Like,
So good.
I think the Rangers would have been. I really think the Rangers would have been better off drafting him than.
I just think even if you boil it down to,
just like need.
Even if you boil it down to the fact that, arguably you can argue skill wise they're on par. I think in the long run, I don't necessarily think that Laf's going to be better in the long run. I don't necessarily think that Stützle is going to be better in the long run. I think projection wise they're pretty much on par. Just the Rangers could have used that center because I think
better and just that like he might have a little more. He might be a little more to bring to his game just because he's bigger. He's more size. Like he's 6'2", 200 pounds as an 18-year-old. Like
I just think that the Rangers are gonna eventually
need a center iceman.
Let's be honest here. Again, I don't want to talk bad about Ryan Strome, but at some point you're gonna need a better second line center than Ryan Strome.
And we're hoping it's Filipino, but
I think Filipino could be a great second line center because he brings a lot of the two-way game that Strome doesn't. But in the NHL, you can never have too many centers. No. You just can't. You can, wingers, not to say they're a dime a dozen, but you can never have too many centers.
You can teach a center to play wing. You can't teach a winger to play center.
That's what I say. You can't throw a wing at center and just say, you'll figure it out.
But you can be like, hey, Andrew Kopp, you've been a center your whole career. You're playing right wing tonight. And he's like, what do I do, coach? He goes, you skate up and down the right side of the ice and you stay there.
You cover the defenseman. That's about it.
And he's like, okay, coach, that's easy. Whereas you take a guy Blake Wheeler's played some center in his career, but take Lafreniere, who's never played any center, and hey, kid, get in there. You'd be
you
like,
have
what?
To guard the slot, but also guard guys like Sidney Crosby.
But also, guess what? If the puck's in the corner, you have to go in and even up a puck battle. But also make sure you have to come back and cover the guy in the slot. And you have to be circling the middle of the ice on the breakout. It's oh my God, please.
And it's not to be mean to, not to take anything away from some of the offensive defensemen in the NHL, but it's definitely easier to guard a defenseman when in terms of you just have to block the shot most of the time.
And keep your stick in the lane, yeah.
It's easier to guard a defenseman than it is to guard a center. Because the center is constantly rotating. I would, if you put me in the answer, hey, Rob, would you rather I'll take arguably the two best players in the league. Or I'll say guys of similar speed. Would you rather guard Victor Hedman or Sidney Crosby? I'm going to guard Victor Hedman because I can just stand there and hope he hits me with a shot.
He might break my leg, but I'm going to stand there.
Even if he goes in deep to make a move, I follow Victor Hedman. He's my guy. Whereas Crosby, it's Crosby's in the corner. He's coming out to the slot. I have to tie up a stick. He's going for the deflection. I'm not guarding a deflection from Victor Hedman 99% of the time. Sometimes he ends up in front of the net.
At center, your job's always changing, so you can't...
Whereas you're hey, you, left defense.
So okay. you can't predict your opponent when you're guarding him. It's
it's constantly changing.
Because he could just... And the thing is, he could just... If he sees the play differently than you, he could just say, screw it, I'm going to blow my coverage on you because I see it breaking out. And then you're like...
So I just think the Rangers, they had a very clear need at center, and it would have, I know I said it before the draft, too, I wouldn't have hated seeing them take Timothy Stützle, a guy with all the upside to turn into, a German Patrick Kane, and we have a Russian Patrick Kane already, come on.
What if he didn't produce, though, in Rangers? What if he got there?
It could be a coaching issue.
Well, not even necessarily a coaching issue, but what if just because the team's too good? Maybe he really shined because he was in the Senators.
Well, he was shining because he got the opportunity. The Rangers would have given him the opportunity. Is the thing.
Well, the other thing is Stützle's also been playing against men his whole life. He came into the league already playing against German men, whereas Laff came from juniors. Yeah. So he's playing.
Well, you go from being a boy. You go from being a man amongst boys. I mean, you're playing against 16-year-old kids that are growing into their bodies, and here's Laff, 6'3", 200 pounds at 18 years old. They're just bodying guys And
then you have Stützle, who is a child amongst men. He's playing against 24-year-old German boys. It's
I think it's just I think that's it's an interesting thing to talk about because it's a development track, right? Because Austin Matthews did the same thing. He went to Europe to play against men. And I think it's just I think it was beneficial for both players in the long run. I mean, obviously Austin Matthews just scored his 34th goal of the year today or whatever it was. So
it just makes that transition a little bit easier.
It also just helps because Austin Matthews isn't undersized. He's big. He's 6'3", but for a guy like Stützle who's undersized, even though the German players in the DEL aren't as skilled as the NHL, and that's not to be mean, it's just the truth.
It's just the fact of the matter, yeah.
But that doesn't take away from the fact the just sheer raw, the raw physicality of it. These are still grown men coming after you. 6'5" Heinz whatever is still gonna try and murder you in the corner, and as Timothy Stützle, it's still your job to defend yourself. So I think that just is better. Whereas Laff in juniors is oh wow, this 5'4" 16-year-old's trying to hit me, and I can literally just hold him in place.
You also learn the little tricks because let's be honest here, Stützle can always bulk up. Chances are his height's not going to change that much. At 18, generally speaking, most human beings are almost done growing. You might get an inch or two, right? But you learn the little tricks. You learn how to play against guys that are NHL size. Yeah. So you learn the little tricks. You learn a little. He's a bigger defenseman, but there's that triangle between his stick and his legs. I can put it through. This guy's going to win the puck battle in the corner against me. I can't win that puck battle. I can pinch off the board, slap his stick, and go around him and get it in the corner. You learn the little things that you don't learn in juniors. And that's not to take anything away from the CHL, because the CHL is arguably, not the best, one of the best developmental leagues in the entire world.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely the best in North America.
But you don't get these little nuances.
Well, because it's like you said, a guy even going back away, like Eric Lindros, right? Or Mario Lemieux. Mario Lemieux and Jr. scored like 250 points. It's like, oh, wow, I wonder why. It's because he was 6'6", 230 pounds at 18 years old, literally playing as kids that were like 15, 16 years old. Like, what is a 16-year-old that's 5'6", 112 pounds going to do against Mario Lemieux, who's 18, 6'6", 250 pounds?
Cry.
Like, Timothy Stutzel's out there, but in the opposite, Timothy Stutzel in this case is that 5'6" kid going up against a 6'6" like gorilla that he has to fight. And I think in the long run he's going to be such a better hockey player. I mean, like you saw at the beginning, like it was an adjustment period for him because like the speed of the game was different, but like the tricks were all the same. Like he was trying all the same things. He's just having success now because he's adjusted like fully to the speed of the game. He's going to be so nasty, bro. Him, Holtz, oh god.
There's also a little bit of a confidence boost when you're coming from a league like that, because I think that's one of the things that's holding Lafreniere back this year is the confidence, because he's not making the same moves that he was making in juniors, and I think that's because, I mean, A, it's because the team he was on was supposed to be more competitive, so he's on a bit of a shorter leash, but also B, he's playing against guys you've never seen this size before, whereas Stützle knows that his inside-outside move works on a 6'4" defenseman because he's done it.
Yeah. The other thing with Laf too is like you to your confidence point, like as the season's gone on and now he's like producing more, like I think he's had like a 4 or 5 game point streak recently or whatever. You saw those moves, you saw the confidence. Like there was one, and Kakko too. You see it with Kakko, like now he's actually playing and like stick handling. And he's not afraid to make a play. And I think like it's, you know, obviously by nature of like putting up points, you're always going to be more confident. But I think it's also like the coach is finally letting that leash go and you're seeing these guys play, whereas Stützle and Ottawa had the longest leash you could give because, like, Ottawa didn't give a shit what happened this season. Like, you want to be competitive, you want to fill seats, but, like, realistically, you're just trusting the process because, like, who gives a shit if they
it's a pandemic? It's a pandemic year. Your seats aren't even open in the first place.
Yeah, you
don't really care about selling tickets because you can't.
You just picked 4 and 5 overall. Like
you signed a goalie to give your team a little bit of respect, but they knew going in they weren't going to compete for a playoff spot. Whereas the Rangers going in, this, in theory, should have been the year that they took that step and not made a 2014 playoff, but made the playoffs.
Yeah. I mean, I still think this is a good year for the Rangers. I think it's a step forward, just that, like, they're playing those meaningful games again, and this year they're actually going to get a chance to play meaningful games all the way through the season instead of meaningful games to, hang on, pandemic.
I mean, they're not out of it. They're definitely not out of it.
It's very unlikely. It's like
I will say it's like a
60-40 shot.
Disappointing, but not a big deal if the Rangers miss the playoffs.
Yeah, this isn't the season like the Rangers need to hit the panic button or anything.
You look at it and you're like, well,
I'll be upset as a Rangers fan, but I won't be
that surprised, really.
I'll be more annoyed that they didn't just play worse.
It's just one of those years where you look at it and you're like, as a franchise, we thought we were going to take that next step. We're disappointed. We stumbled, but we didn't eat shit yet.
It's not the Columbus Blue Jackets who have been taking consecutive steps forward until like falling down a flight of stairs this year and being in the basement. Like,
yeah, well,
and that's again by virtue of John Tortorella being both the best and worst coach in the NHL at the same time. If you can,
he just has an expiration date. I think as a coach, I think eventually his style just wears off.
He's like Pat Burns, man. I know I've said it before, but he's like Pat Burns. They have it. The guys that are like so aggressive and like, you know, taskmasters have it. Unless you're Scotty Bowman, have an expiration date because Scotty Bowman just always won no matter what, and guys hated him,
But he just figured it out. Yeah. So we're gonna wrap up. We are hitting about the 90-minute mark here. Unless you guys have anything last second you want to talk about.
I would like to give everyone the update on our shit show of a fantasy league at this point. These kids are really throwing heavy shit at the wall. Leeds and Chris. That I have. What are we at probably? Give a rough estimate of how many transactions you probably think have happened.
They've made
at least 20.
Between the two of them, they've made 40 transactions in the last. More than 40 because I pulled up the transactions page and it shows 20 per page. They've made more than 40 transactions in 3 days.
So yeah, these two little goobers are really do
you want to know how often I get these notifications now?
I get like 8 notifications.
And they come in bursts too, because the one does it, and then like 10 minutes later you get a second burst.
Yeah.
and then like a few hours will pass,
and then
you'll get
more.
another burst.
Bro, and the worst part is like not to say like I have important stuff coming in my email or anything like that, but it's like every time I see a Gmail notification, I'm like, oh, is something like important? Like, do
I get a
have to
little
look at this?
excited. I think it's something important.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, do I have to like look at something? And then it's like, no, it's just these goobers like jumping their whole team and putting a new team on the ice every day. It's like, oh my god. Listen, I don't care. I'm out, but like,
one of my favorite things that they do though is they'll pick up a goalie in the morning. The goalie will get pulled or will be projected not to play. And then you see like 6 goalie changes go through.
You know what I really want to do to them? And I talked to Joe, said this to me too the other day. He goes,
take their players.
yes, if they drop a guy like a big time player because they need the start, and he's like, I would just grab them and hold them hostage. And I was like, I mean,
I'm kind of thinking about sniping certain forward that they dropped. So.
I mean, I sniped a goaltender.
You can
off
say
one
it.
of
I'm
them.
not.
Yeah, I'm not gonna do it.
Yeah,
either.
like.
Oh yeah, you can't play forwards.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And I'm out of the playoffs, so it
so-
doesn't matter.
Thinking about taking Matt Kachuk off the waivers.
I thought
that's
about the
an
same
interesting one.
thing.
But so just to finish up before we continue discussing it, just finish the update. Rob and I, so they're at 193 to 170 currently at the current moment. So it's a pretty close matchup. They have 33 and 35 starts already,
I think I have
which
like
is
26.
nuts. We're at Rob is 24. I'm at 19.
Yeah.
And I am very handcuffed. I have like no forward starts to spare.
I don't think I hit when I played Chris last week, I don't think I hit the 30 game mark until Sunday.
Yeah,
when
no.
I threw everything at the wall at him.
Yeah.
Because I needed to, you know?
Last week I threw a lot of shit at the wall.
But you needed to win.
I didn't even throw nearly as much as this. Most of it was me just messing up the roster.
Yeah.
And then having to make changes or like exactly what I described earlier with their goalie situation was me.
Carter Hart did that to me last week. Carter Hart was projected to start, and the only game the Flyers won last week, Carter Hart was supposed to play, and I think it was a shutout. I think they won like 1-0 or 2-0 over the Islanders or something stupid.
They lost to us 1-0 in a shoot.
That's what it was. Yes.
Overtime.
Carter Hart was supposed to play, and right before the game started, he had an unforeseen injury. I lost he would have got like 9 points.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my god, come on, man. And now he's out indefinitely, and I got eliminated, so it doesn't even matter.
But so as it stands, the most likely projected finals will be Rob versus.
I don't know who's going to win Baton.
If it's Chris, we're gonna be disappointed because Chris will have a mountain to climb to beat Rob. Actually, I don't even think he will because his limited number of starts will probably match the number of starts you'll do. But on another note, I also think that Philip Grubauer should have been sniped, and I think you should have sniped JT Miller. JT Miller plays Ottawa 4 games in a row.
I mean, I have some Canucks players I've thought about dropping, but
I didn't think the Canucks are going to come out as good as they did, and they made Toronto look like absolute idiots.
Bo Horvat put up that was really like crazy for me. Bo Horvat came out, and I was like, I'm going to start him because like he was good for me before, and I was like, he might be a little sluggish because of the COVID. He's been laid off for a couple of weeks. Dude comes out and puts up 3 points. I was like, thank you, based Bo Horvat. But I mean, I'm glad I didn't trade for some backstory, I tried getting Brock Besser off of Joe at the deadline. Ended up not getting. I got Carey Price off Rob, which I mean, it was a gamble because Montreal was kind of up and down.
In the regular season, but
he got injured. Yeah, he got injured, but it is what it is.
Aaron Ekblad at the trade deadline, so you know.
Yeah, I mean, honestly,
real great.
For what it's worth, Carey Price for a second round pick, like one pick, 1-for-1, wasn't the worst thing in the world considering I can, in theory, like
I mean, they had a decent schedule to end the season, so if you didn't get hurt.
That was really it. And I mean, I had Elias Pettersson spend the last 8 weeks of the season on my injured reserve, so that I really should have just dropped him. But like, you know what it was? It wasn't like he was injured and they were like, oh, he's out week to week.
Are you keeping him?
Not this season.
It's like
I'm not keeping him as
one
a
of those
keeper
things
now.
where it's like, oh, he might come back, and you're like, I don't want to lose.
But then every day they would push it, be like, expected to return Wednesday, and then they'd play Wednesday, he wouldn't play. Expected to return Friday when the next game was. Oh, well, okay, I'll hold on to Pettersson. Hopefully he plays on Friday. And it went like that for weeks, and I lost so many points because I kept getting him stuck in starts.
Yeah.
He'd be like, I'd play him and he wouldn't play, and then eventually I threw him on injured reserve. God, terrible.
But no, you're good. So yeah, that our fantasy situation is really down to a monkey fest.
It's a shit situation, honestly.
The draft's gonna be fun.
Yeah, we're gonna add a new team next season. We're not sure.
First expansion team.
Yeah, we're adding our first expansion
to the
team.
Benders Hockey League.
The Seattle Kraken.
We have some prospective owners in in talks. You know, we have the paperwork's getting drawn up. You know,
we're drawing up some documents.
The board of governors have already voted. We're all pretty much in agreement on the expansion here. You know.
So the fantasy league is an interesting little bit right now. We're in an interesting point, and the only reason I really think you should have sniped Grubauer is because Chris was definitely going to keep him.
Yeah, I could have dropped Ottinger, but Ottinger plays Detroit 4 times this week, and I know Hudobin's starting tonight, but Ottinger's probably going to start the next one. So
Yeah.
it was just like if they didn't play Detroit 4 times, it would have been like, all right, I'll take.
Well, that's why I texted Chris after he dropped JT Miller, and I was like, "You're kidding, right?" And he was so the conversation. I was explaining this to Speed. The conversation went, "Yo, why'd you drop JT Miller?" He hasn't played well, and he's been like playing really shitty, and like I need someone to like for points tonight, bro. He's played 1 game in the past month.
Yeah, like
He's just not been playing well, bro. Like he didn't look very good out there, and like I just need someone. I was like, you're an absolute idiot. He plays Ottawa 4 times in a row. If you don't pick him back up, I can guarantee you someone else will.
He plays Ottawa 4 times, and he plays in their top 6, which is one of the most potent in that entire division. I mean, right now he's probably playing with Brock Besser still. He's probably playing Besser and Horvat because Hoglander's probably on that second line. That's a guy that's. So I know we're not doing anything, but last minute, like, called a trophy this year. Kind of a crapshoot, huh?
if Kaprizov didn't exist, yes.
Yeah, I mean outside of
Did you see him last night?
Yeah,
Filth.
outside of Kirill Kaprizov, obviously, which I mean to me is kind of like the Panarin situation, right? 24 years old, like played professional hockey, whatever. Anyway, but like it's kind of even goaltenders. There's been a lot of really interesting like rookie goaltenders. I mean, you have Jeremy Swayman up in Boston, Vitek Vanacek, Kaapo Kähkönen, riding shotgun with Kirill.
I think if Kähkönen didn't miss a couple games from injury, and Kaprizov didn't exist, I think that he'd probably be winning.
Yeah, I mean, even Shesterkin has an outside like shot at it. He's probably gonna get in the top 10 of voting because he still qualifies.
Kirill is like the
It's
cheat
just
code
too-
right
yeah.
now,
Dollar
but outside
Bill
of him,
So okay, real quick about Kirill too. Why do they call him Dollar Bill Kirill, not the real deal Kirill? Because like that's
or
such a
Kirill
better.
the Thrill,
I think Dollar Bill.
Well, 'cause it's dollar
came
bill.
'Cause he's money.
Yeah, he's money. He's
I
dollar bill,
I
y'all.
think it came from Matt Dumba. I think he started that one.
Yeah, I think because like they said he was money, and then someone said like dollar bills,
Yeah,
So
I
he's-
think Matt Dumba was the one that came up with that. Because I saw some clip of like them in the hallway when it first started. I think it was Dumba, but I could be wrong about that.
it definitely broke down like you were just getting to. Like they were definitely on the bench, and he was like, "Yo, that kid's money," and then someone was like, "Dollar bills, yo,"
yeah, exactly.
and someone was like, "Bill, Kirill."
It works.
Dollar Bill Kirill.
But I'm just saying, like,
Definitely
Like the
one of
equipment
better- I think
manager?
It's one of the better nicknames in the league.
I just think like the real deal. Like it's kind of like when Shaquille O'Neal called that guy the truth when he was like, "Yo, that kid is the truth. He is the like that. He's the real deal," And because I think like Kirill is like just a god, like the real deal, man. Like he's the truth.
So, let's end the episode with the OG, the classic Stanley Cup matchups.
Oh jeez.
I think I'm going to go with Tampa Bay and Colorado. I think if Colorado stays healthy, if the goaltending stays healthy, arguably there should be no team that should be able to stop them. And I think Tampa Bay is just as good of a team as last year. So I'm going Tampa Bay and Colorado.
As much as it pains me to say it, I'm going Tampa, but I think the Islanders really have a shot at the Stanley Cup final just because
I would lose my mind if they did.
I mean, it's just hard to argue. I mean, they got to the conference final last year. They were kind of iffy through the regular season last year like they were this year, but this year they managed to stay mostly healthy, like their back end, which is the big important part. I mean, losing your captain sucks, but you can replace a winger much easier than you can replace like your
Top
number 2,
defensemen
number
like
3,
Adam
yeah.
Pelech.
Adam Pelech, and then you lost.
Pelech, Boychuk was hurt. Mayfield was banged up.
Letty went down with an injury for a little bit, but once healthy, you took the Tampa Bay Lightning, eventual Stanley Cup champion, to 7 games. Oh, no, you didn't.
Game 6
Game
OT.
6.
We were the team that took them the furthest, though.
Right, yeah. So
Because Dallas only made Game 6 regulation. And I know I'm banging this drum, but that Game 1 was BS.
traveling
and Game 2,
into
we only lost because we let up a goal with like 10 seconds left. So
Yeah.
realistically speaking, there was 3... If we count Game 2 as an OT game, because it essentially was, there was 3 overtime games in that
The other
run.
thing is, I think the Islanders' goaltending is much better. Not to take anything away from Thomas Greiss. I think Thomas Greiss is great, but Sorokin is just he's a major upgrade on that 1B position than Greiss was, and Varlamov is proving like last year wasn't a fluke. Like behind a good defensive structure, which he really never got in Colorado, he's proving to flourish.
I also just think if push comes to shove, if we need goals, we have a weapon in Oliver Wahlstrom we didn't have last year.
And Matt Barzal, like if you really need to, you can put those 2 guys out there and just let the leash run.
Like if we're down,
mean,
if our backs are against the wall, if it's like Game 5 and we're down 3-1, like, and we need goals bad, we didn't have a guy like Walsham last year. Walsham is the only kid besides a Ryan Pollock slap shot. Oliver Walsham is the only guy that can beat a goalie clean on this team with his shot.
No.
And we just don't have shooters like him outside of Oliver Walsham. So
yeah, those are my picks. The Lightning and the
Tampa Islanders. We have Tampa, Colorado.
Oi. I
I really badly wanted to say Carolina, but like if you asked me between Carolina, if it was like, hey, Peter Mrazek or Andre Vasilevsky, like I'm not picking Peter Mrazek. Like I'm sorry. And I would have said Florida, but Ekblad. That's 24 minutes a night.
If he stayed healthy, it'd be a different story.
I'd have to say my picks would be Colorado and Florida.
I respect the Florida pick. I do.
They've been red hot. They're finally proving to everybody what I've been saying about them for years, which is they have a great core that could actually be competitive if they had a goaltender.
And if Bob plays the way that Bob can, then arguably I would pick Bob
And
as many times as I would pick Vasilevsky. If we're talking prime, if we're talking like Vezina caliber Bob, I'm picking him just as many times as I'm picking
Let's not ignore that they also have probably
the best
coach.
Oh, they do have the best coach in hockey right now, probably.
And the most experienced, the best coach to go on a playoff run with.
Yes, I will acquiesce to that one.
That's what I was getting at.
He's definitely a top 5
definitely
coach in the league.
top 3 for sure.
Yeah, I'm saying though, like in terms of just going.
I think this year he might win the Jack Adams.
Going into a playoff run, I'm taking him probably before any other coach in the league.
Yeah, 100%.
Experience.
100%. The only coaches I might pick over him are honestly that are still in the league might be John Tortorella, just because he has more, like just as much playoff experience. Doesn't have the wins and the Stanley Cups, but he has the playoff experience.
He has 1 cup.
He's 1 to 3. I mean, But, and honestly, it might be the old Flyers coach. Pete DeBoer. Not Pete DeBoer. Not Pete DeBoer.
I was just saying,
oh my
not
God,
Pete DeBoer.
The guy in Carolina.
Isn't Carolina's coach Rod Brindamore?
It is Rod Brindamore. He coached Carolina to their Stanley Cup. He coached the Islanders.
Laviolette?
Yes, Peter Laviolette. Yes. I would probably pick him just because he has so much, like, again, only 1 Stanley Cup, but, like, so much success with so many different franchises. And he's been in, like, very different situations to get them to that position. I mean, look what he did with Nashville for all those years. He took them from a defensive-heavy team to, like, a scoring threat, and they got to a Stanley Cup final.
And I love to see Quenneville winning, too.
He deserves... For what he did this year, I would love nothing more to see him get there.
I think it's either going to be him or it's going to be Colleton that wins the Coach of the Year award. I think it's either one of those two.
Colleton's probably not going to win it, though, just because of the slide they've had.
Yeah.
That's just because, like, their goaltending hasn't been as good. I mean, Kevin Lankinen hasn't been as good.
I just don't think anyone's beating Colorado in a series. I think you can beat Colorado in a game. You're not beating them 2 nights in a row.
The only chance you had of beating Colorado would be if there was another best of 5 playing, because you might be able to catch them on 2 off nights.
That's what I'm saying.
Or if they get hurt again.
But otherwise, no.
I mean,
I'm not betting
they addressed the issues that I had on the defense because they brought in a guy like Zadorov, and he makes the defense like very hard to play against. He's a big checking. Oh no, they traded Zadorov to Chicago.
They brought in Brendan Saad.
Yeah, so I didn't like that move. That was one thing I don't like about Colorado is their defense is kind of soft. They don't really have like.
But the improvement to their goaltending was a big thing.
The issue is also on offense. If one person has a bad night, there's 3 other people that can have a good night instantly.
People always forget that Nazem Kadri's on this team.
I was going to say
Nazem Kadri was a 2-time 30-goal scorer for the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's a perfect number 2.
Second line.
Perfect number 2.
I have been talking about that man since our first fantasy league.
He's good.
Because I've loved him ever since then. Because I was doing my research back then. I was really into the random players, and I found him randomly like a free agency pick on Toronto before he blew up, like in a waiver, like in a random article. And I've been following him since, and I love him. He's so nitty. He's mean, bro. He's a mean bastard on the ice.
He's exactly the type of player that you need in a playoff series. He's the player that Toronto doesn't have.
Because
he's a matchup centerman. He goes out there and he's just nasty. He defends. He's hard to play against. He wins face-offs.
He'll drop the gloves. He'll fight. He'll
throw a big hit.
He'll throw a dirty hit too. He doesn't care if he as like a retribution hit. I'm saying like
in the Toronto series, he gets a need by Jake DeBrusk, comes back and crushed. I mean, again, it's a stupid play, but he took it on himself. He's like, "This is playoff hockey. I'm gonna go out there and run him."
And that's not the best idea for you in terms of like a fire and a go get, like, that's our team.
Yeah, that's. But yeah, I don't know.
Oh yeah, I know.
So, you heard it here, folks. We have 2 votes for Tampa Bay, and then 1 vote each for, or 2 votes for Tampa Bay, 2 votes for Colorado, and then 1 vote each for the Islanders and the Florida Panthers. So, again, next podcast, we're probably just going to talk about any news. The season's starting to wind down. Eventually, we'll be doing our season-ending podcast, and it's playoff time, baby.
You know, you're probably not getting a playoff preview show this year just because, like, the turnaround's going to be so fast.
It entirely depends on, because we like to do 1 podcast a week. So realistically speaking, it depends on if all the positions are settled, because that last week that they added onto the season for the extra COVID games, if the playoff teams' positions are settled, then we can do like a full-on thing. But if there's still like positions to be had, I don't want to do a podcast where it's like, oh, let's do Hurricanes versus Predators matchup, and then the Hurricanes drop out of first. Now it's Florida Panthers, and
yeah, no, I know what you're saying.
So, stay tuned. Stay tuned to the Twitter. I will let you guys know about a potential playoff preview. Depends on the timing of things. But next week, just more general NHL news. Starting to wrap down the season, and I am very excited for playoffs. It's going to be very interesting with this division format that we're going into, and I don't know. I'm excited for the playoffs to start, and I'm also excited to see who comes out of these divisions. So I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys again